A single mother dances for an Arab billionaire to save her son, but discovers a shocking secret. Before we begin the story, let us know in the comments, which city are you watching from? Enjoy the story, everyone. Layla, a single mother and a refugee in Qatar, had endured countless hardships. Each day was a struggle to put food on the table and protect her 3-year-old son from the harsh weight of poverty. She worked as a waitress in a modest cafe frequented by tourists, but her wages barely covered the basics. When the cafe owner announced he would have to cut back her working hours, her heart sank. She needed to find a solution quickly, or her son Yusuf would go hungry. One afternoon, as Layla was serving tables, she noticed a man sitting alone in a corner. He exuded power and mystery. His spotless white robe and piercing gaze caught her attention. She heard his name whispered by the customers. Khalid Al-Fahim, one of the wealthiest and most enigmatic men in Qatar. Khalid's eyes never left her. As the cafe closed, an employee approached Layla and handed her an envelope. "Mr. Al-Fahim asked me to give this to you," he said before hurrying away. With trembling hands, Layla opened the envelope. Inside was a short, direct note. "Layla Roshan, I have a proposal that could solve your problems. Meet me tomorrow at 8 p.m. at the address below. Come alone. Khalid Al-Fahim." Her heart raced. A proposal from someone as powerful as Khalid could either be the solution she desperately needed or the beginning of something dangerous. But with Yusuf as her top priority, Layla decided to take the risk. The next evening, after putting Yusuf to sleep, Layla arrived at the address specified in the note. It was a grand palace on the outskirts of the city. A butler escorted her to a luxurious room where Khalid was waiting. He greeted her with a slight nod and gestured to a chair in front of him. "Layla, thank you for coming," he began, his voice deep and calm. "I've heard about your situation and believe I can help you." Layla sat down, feeling the weight of the moment. "What do you want from me?" she asked bluntly. Khalid leaned forward slightly. "I need a dancer." "A dancer?" Layla frowned, puzzled. "Yes, for private performances. My guests appreciate art and tradition. In return, I offer a generous amount, enough to ensure you and your son never struggle again." She remained silent, her heart pounding. The offer seemed straightforward, but she knew a man like Khalid didn't make such proposals without ulterior motives. "Why me?" she asked. Khalid's gaze remained steady. "You have something unique, a spark that few possess, and you're beautiful." Layla felt a shiver run down her spine. "What are the conditions?" "Simple. You will dance only for me and my guests. There will be no physical contact. Everything will remain professional, as outlined in the contract." He slid a document across the table. Layla quickly skimmed through the clauses, each one more surreal than the last. She hesitated. The idea of dancing for Khalid and his guests made her uneasy, but the image of Yusuf going hungry flashed in her mind. Without overthinking, she grabbed the pen and signed. "Welcome to my world, Layla." Khalid gave a faint smile, a blend of mystery and danger. Layla didn't know it yet, but that contract wouldn't just ensure Yusuf's survival, it would change their lives forever. The next evening, Layla found herself back at the palace, caught in a mix of nerves and determination. The weight of the contract felt heavier now that she was about to perform for the first time. Still, the thought of Yusuf, safe and sleeping with a full stomach, kept her steady. She was led to a lavish room where traditional dance attire was laid out. An emerald dress with golden embroidery and translucent veils shimmered under the soft glow of the chandeliers. Layla dressed in silence, fastening the anklet bells, their gentle sound filling the room like a prelude. When she was finally summoned, she followed the butler to a grand hall adorned with luxurious tapestries and Persian rugs. Khalid sat on a sofa, accompanied by only 2 guests, both men of distinguished and refined appearance. He made a slight gesture with his hand, signaling her to begin. The music started, a soft, hypnotic melody that flowed like the desert wind. Layla took a deep breath and began to move. Her arms glided through the air, the veils floating like waves, while the anklet bells marked the rhythm. Each movement was deliberate yet naturally graceful. Khalid watched her intently, his face expressionless, but his eyes revealed something deeper. Curiosity, admiration, perhaps even something he himself didn't fully understand. Layla danced not merely out of obligation, but as if she were silently telling a story. With every spin, she remembered her journey to that moment, her struggle for survival, and her love for her son. Her dance embodied both strength and vulnerability, and though she spoke no words, she knew she was making herself understood. When the music ended, Layla gave a respectful bow and waited. The silence in the room was broken by the gentle sound of Khalid's applause. His guests followed suit, offering discreet praise for her performance. "Impressive," Khalid said, finally rising to his feet. "You've exceeded my expectations, Layla." Despite the compliment, Layla remained composed. "Thank you, Mr. Khalid," she replied firmly. Before leaving, Khalid approached her and spoke in a low, almost confidential tone. "You did well tonight. Keep it up, and this arrangement will benefit us both." Layla simply nodded and left the room, relieved to have completed her first night. Later, as she made her way back to the room assigned to her, Layla crossed paths with a strikingly imposing woman. Her sharp features and piercing eyes seemed to scrutinize every detail. Sophia, Khalid's cousin, made no effort to hide her disapproval as she glared at Layla. "So you're Khalid's dancer," Sophia said in a cold, sarcastic tone. "I hope you know your place." Layla remained composed. "My place is wherever my son is safe and well-fed." Sophia raised an eyebrow, surprised by the firm response. "We'll see how long you last." Layla refused to be intimidated. She knew she would face opposition, but nothing would deter her from her goal. Back in her room, Layla sat in front of the mirror, carefully removing her accessories. Her reflection revealed a tired but determined woman. Yusuf's face came to mind, and she allowed herself a small smile. Downstairs, Khalid was still in the room, now alone. His gaze lingered on the empty space where Layla had danced just minutes earlier, lost in thought. There was something about her that intrigued him deeply, something he couldn't ignore. The third night came quickly, and Layla was already beginning to grow accustomed to the palace's luxuries. Yet, despite the opulent surroundings, she knew that with every step she took there, she was delving deeper into an unknown and dangerous world. This time, the hall was even more magnificent, illuminated by crystal chandeliers. Khalid, seated at the center, was alone. The absence of guests intrigued her, but she didn't dare ask. She simply adjusted her veils and waited for the music to begin. The first notes played, soft as the desert breeze. Layla began her performance, each movement precise yet fluid. The silence in the room was almost oppressive, broken only by the delicate chime of her ankle bells. Khalid watched her intently, his dark eyes following every spin and every graceful motion. When the music ended, Layla offered her customary bow. Khalid stared at her for a few moments before rising and approaching her. "You dance as if you carry the weight of 1,000 stories," he said in a low voice. Layla swallowed hard. "My story doesn't matter. I'm here to fulfill the contract." Khalid raised an eyebrow, as though he hadn't expected such a direct response. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to decipher her. "Sometimes, a contract can be more than just words on paper," he murmured before walking away. Layla felt a shiver run down her spine. Those words echoed in her mind as she left the hall, but her thoughts were interrupted when she once again encountered Sophia in the corridor. Sophia, with her cold eyes and cynical smile, blocked Layla's path. "You think you know Khalid? Don't be fooled. He's a man of many secrets." "I'm not interested in his secrets," Layla replied firmly, trying to stay calm. Sophia let out a sharp laugh. "Ignorance is dangerous, especially for someone like you." Before Layla could respond, Sophia walked away, leaving a heavy air of distrust behind. Later that night, Layla heard footsteps in the hallway outside her room. Curious, she opened the door slightly and saw Khalid walking toward a secluded wing of the palace. Intrigued, she followed him from a distance, staying hidden in the shadows. He entered a room, but Layla couldn't see inside clearly. However, she could hear fragments of a conversation. Khalid's voice was deep and restrained. "She cannot know, not yet." Layla couldn't catch the rest, but those words planted a seed of doubt in her mind. Who was Khalid really? Why had he chosen her for this role in his life? When Khalid left the room, Layla quickly returned to her quarters, taking deep breaths to calm herself. She knew something was being kept from her, something that could change everything. The next morning, Khalid invited her for an informal meeting in the palace garden. He appeared more relaxed, dressed in light clothing, but his gaze still carried the weight of hidden truths. "Layla," he began as they walked slowly among the flowers, Why did you accept my contract? She hesitated before answering. My son means everything to me. No matter what I have to do, I will do it to give him a better life. Khalid nodded, as if he had anticipated her response. A mother's love is powerful, but I wonder, how much are you willing to sacrifice for him? Layla stopped and looked him straight in the eye. Everything, to the very last part of me. They stood in silence for a moment, and Layla noticed a flicker of something in Khalid's expression. Perhaps respect, perhaps something more. Then I hope you'll never have to prove it, he said, his tone cryptic. Before Layla could ask what he meant, Khalid changed the subject and guided her back to the palace. Later that night, Layla reflected on everything that had happened. She knew Khalid was hiding something, and it unsettled her. But her priority remained Yusuf. If staying firm in this contract meant keeping her son safe, she would endure, even if the cost was greater than she anticipated. Outside, Khalid stood by a large window, gazing at the full moon, his hands clasped behind his back. He couldn't deny that Layla was different, someone who challenged his carefully maintained facade of control. She was a reminder that the past never truly stayed buried. As the night wore on, the secrets they both carried became more intertwined, like the veils Layla wore in her dances, delicate yet full of hidden meaning. Layla woke early that morning, but the peace was short-lived. As she adjusted the scarf over her hair in front of the mirror, a sharp knock echoed through the door. Before she could respond, Sophia entered without permission, her gaze cold and unforgiving. I see you've adapted quickly to this place, Sophia said, crossing her arms. But don't be fooled. You're nothing more than a disposable piece in Khalid's game. Layla took a deep breath, refusing to react to the venom in the woman's words. Whatever his reasons are, they're none of your concern. Sophia stepped closer, narrowing her eyes. You think you know who he is, but you're chasing an illusion. Khalid will never let someone like you get close to him. Layla held her gaze, feeling a quiet anger rise within her. I don't want to get close to Khalid. I'm here for my son's sake, nothing more. Safia's sarcastic laugh echoed through the room. We'll see how long that lie holds. Later, Layla tried to focus on her dance lessons. The choreographer, a stern woman, corrected every movement with precision. Yet Safia's constant presence loomed like a shadow, her words echoing in Layla's mind. But Layla knew she couldn't afford to falter. Each perfected move was one step closer to ensuring Yusuf's safety. That evening, Khalid hosted an intimate dinner for a select few guests. Layla was summoned to perform again. The hall was adorned with candles, their warm glow illuminating the faces of those present. Sophia was there, her triumphant expression suggesting she had something planned. Layla began to dance, focusing on every movement. The music filled the hall, creating an almost magical atmosphere. But as she twirled, her eyes met Khalid's. There was something in his gaze that unsettled her, something that seemed to see beyond the dancer before him. When the performance ended, the guests applauded politely, but Sophia rose and walked over to Khalid, ignoring Layla entirely. A beautiful display, wasn't it? She remarked, her smile cold. Yes, it was, Khalid replied calmly, though his eyes remained on Layla. Sophia noticed and pressed her lips together. I hope you know what you're doing, cousin. A woman like her doesn't belong in this world. Khalid turned to Sophia, his expression hardening. And what world is that? A world where we judge without understanding? Layla has more dignity than many who walk through these doors. Sophia fell silent, but her anger was evident. She left the hall, leaving behind a heavy tension in the air. In the following days, Layla tried to avoid Sophia whenever possible, but the woman always seemed to be lurking nearby. One night, Layla found a letter slipped under her door. The message was short and threatening. Be careful who you trust. Your secret could cost you dearly. Layla felt her stomach turn. She knew Sophia was behind it, but she couldn't understand how the woman had discovered so much about her. Determined to protect Yusuf, Layla went straight to Khalid. He was in his study, surrounded by piles of documents, but he looked up as soon as she entered. I need to speak with you, Layla said firmly. Of course, Khalid replied, gesturing for her to sit. Layla hesitated but decided to get straight to the point. Your cousin Sophia is trying to threaten me. I don't know what she wants, but I can't allow this to affect my son. Khalid's brow furrowed, his expression hardening. Sophia has no authority here. I will handle her. Can you guarantee that? Layla challenged, her eyes burning with determination. Because I won't risk Yusuf's safety. Khalid held her gaze for a long moment before responding. Layla, you have my word. As long as you are under this roof, nothing will happen to you or your son. Despite his firm tone, Layla knew it wouldn't be that simple. Sophia wouldn't give up easily. Later that night, Sophia met with an unknown man in a secluded corner of the palace. I want Layla exposed, she said, handing him an envelope. Do whatever it takes to get her out of here. The man nodded and disappeared into the shadows. Sophia smiled, convinced that Layla would soon be removed for good. Layla, however, was not one to back down. Her maternal instincts and unwavering determination prepared her for any battle ahead. Khalid, on the other hand, was beginning to see that Layla was no ordinary woman. She had a strength that defied everything around her, including him. At the center of it all, fate seemed to be weaving their lives together in an inescapable bond. Layla adjusted her veils with trembling fingers. Sophia's veiled threat still echoed in her mind, but she couldn't let fear take hold. As she walked down the corridor toward the grand hall, she thought of Yusuf's face. Every step she took in that luxurious place was for him. Her dance wasn't just a performance, it was an act of survival. When Layla entered the hall, the atmosphere was heavy. Khalid was once again seated alone on his usual divan. The silence was broken only by the soft chime of the bells on her ankles as she took her position. He made a subtle gesture, and the music began, filling the room with a hypnotic melody. Layla's movements were precise, but her heart raced. Her mind struggled to stay in the present, even as the weight of her worries threatened to overwhelm her. For her, the dance was more than just a contract. It was a way to express all the anguish and hope she carried within. Khalid, on the other hand, watched her with unusual focus. He seemed captivated, as though each of her gestures revealed something he had never noticed before. There was a silent connection between them, something Layla couldn't explain but couldn't ignore either. After the dance, Khalid slowly approached her without saying a word. He stopped just a few steps away, his eyes locked on hers. You're stronger than you seem, he said, his tone both an observation and a compliment. Layla remained silent. She didn't know how to respond. She was there simply to fulfill her part of the agreement, yet Khalid's intensity unsettled her. You dance as though you carry the weight of something much greater, he continued. What gives you that strength? She hesitated before replying, My son, he's the reason for everything. Khalid nodded slowly, as if understanding more than she expected. Yusuf is lucky to have you as his mother. Layla looked away, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability. Before she could respond, Khalid added, Sophia will no longer be a problem. I promise to protect you and your son, and I will keep my word. There was sincerity in his voice, but Layla knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. Sophia was dangerous, and she needed to stay one step ahead. Later that night, Layla was urgently called to Yusuf's room. The boy had a high fever, and his small body trembled beneath the blankets. Desperate, Layla tried to cool his forehead with a damp cloth, whispering words of comfort. Khalid appeared at the door moments later, alarmed by Layla's distress. What's going on? He asked, stepping into the room. He has a fever, Layla said, her voice trembling. I need to take him to a doctor. Khalid gestured quickly, summoning one of his assistants. Prepare the car immediately. We'll take them to the best hospital in the city. Layla looked at Khalid, surprised and grateful. Despite everything, he didn't hesitate to help. Minutes later, they were on their way to the hospital, Layla holding Yusuf's small hand the entire time. At the hospital, Yusuf was treated promptly, and the doctor reassured them it was nothing serious. It's just a high fever. He needs rest and plenty of fluids, the doctor said before discharging them. Back at the palace, Layla laid Yusuf in bed and sat by his side, watching him sleep. Khalid remained at the door, silent, as if respecting the moment. Thank you, Layla said finally, without turning to face him. For everything. There's no need to thank me, Khalid replied. I did what anyone would do. Layla let out a quiet sigh. Not everyone would. Khalid took a few steps into the room, but stopped before getting too close. Yusuf is important to you. That makes him important to me as well. Layla finally looked at him, puzzled. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Khalid seemed sincere, yet there was also a sadness that didn't match his authoritative demeanor. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked, breaking the silence. Khalid hesitated for a moment before answering. "Perhaps because you remind me of something I lost a long time ago." Those words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Layla didn't know how to respond but felt that Khalid was, in some way, opening up to her, revealing layers he kept hidden from the rest of the world. That night, Layla barely slept. Khalid's words echoed in her mind, mingling with her own doubts and fears. She knew her position in the palace was precarious, but she was also starting to sense that something deeper was unfolding. Meanwhile, downstairs, Khalid remained in his study, his eyes fixed on an old photograph he held in his hands. The image showed a smiling woman holding a small child. He ran his thumb over the woman's face, his eyes filled with memories. "I promised I'd never let this happen again," he murmured to himself before tucking the photo away and turning off the lights. Fate seemed determined to intertwine Layla's and Khalid's lives even further, but what lay ahead would test their strength and convictions. The palace's golden lights reflected off the cold marble walls as Layla walked down the main corridor. Her footsteps echoed, but her mind was preoccupied with thoughts of Yusuf and Khalid. Her constant concern for her son's safety now shared space with Khalid's enigmatic words. "You remind me of something I lost." Her thoughts were interrupted when, turning a corner, she came face to face with Safiya. Khalid's cousin was dressed elegantly, but her eyes were like blades, sharp and full of disdain. "You've done well to capture Khalid's attention," Safiya said with a venomous smile. "But don't be fooled, Layla. He may seem kind, but he's ruthless when it comes to protecting his reputation." "I'm not interested in anyone's approval here," Layla replied, standing firm. "I'm here only for my son." Safiya took a step forward, her voice low but laden with menace. "Be careful what you say. You're playing with forces you don't understand." Layla held Safiya's gaze, but before she could respond, Khalid appeared in the corridor. His quick stride suggested he had overheard part of the exchange. "Safiya," he called, his voice low yet commanding. "May I have a word with you in private?" Layla remained where she was, watching as Safiya walked away with Khalid. The tension in the air was palpable. Something significant was about to unfold, and Layla knew it would be wise to stay vigilant. Khalid led Safiya into one of the palace offices and shut the door behind them. His usually composed face now bore an uncharacteristic hardness. "I want you to stop your scheming, Safiya," he said, crossing his arms. "I'm only protecting our family," Safiya replied, her chin raised defiantly. "Layla is a threat to everything we've built." Khalid narrowed his eyes. "Layla is not a threat. She's a woman trying to protect her son, something you clearly don't understand." "She's an outsider," Safiya shot back, her voice brimming with anger. "Do you trust her more than your own family?" "I trust her because she's proven her loyalty," Khalid said firmly. "And you've only given me reasons to question yours." Safiya's face paled momentarily, but she quickly regained her composure. "If you keep defending her, you'll bring disgrace to our family." "Enough." Khalid cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "If you try to harm Layla or Yusuf again, I'll have no choice but to remove you from this palace for good." A heavy silence fell between them before Safiya abruptly left the room, leaving Khalid alone with his thoughts. Meanwhile, Layla sat in her room with Yusuf, who was playing with small wooden blocks Khalid had sent for him. She watched her son but couldn't stop thinking about Khalid. He was a man of many facets, sometimes protective, sometimes distant, yet always shrouded in mystery. When there was a knock at the door, she braced herself for more trouble. But it was Khalid. "May I speak with you?" he asked, remaining at the doorway. Layla nodded, signaling that he could enter. Khalid stepped in but kept a respectful distance. "I want you to know that you're safe here," he said, sincerity in his eyes. "I won't allow Safiya or anyone else to threaten you or Yusuf." "I appreciate that," Layla replied, folding her arms. "But I can't help wondering why you're so willing to protect us." Khalid sighed, looking away for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "Because you remind me of something I lost," he said, his voice now tinged with emotion. "My wife passed away years ago, and with her I lost the chance to have a family. But seeing you fight for your son, it reminds me of what truly matters." Layla remained silent, Khalid's words hitting her in an unexpected way. There was something genuine in his confession, something that made her want to believe him. "Thank you," she said softly at last. Khalid gave a faint smile. "Get some rest, Layla. Tomorrow will be an important day." The next morning, Sophia, still furious after Khalid's reprimand, schemed in secret. In her room, she reviewed plans with the same mysterious man she had met earlier. "Everything must be perfect," she said, handing him a folder of documents. "I want Layla exposed once and for all." Outside, one of the palace guards overheard part of their conversation and quickly reported it to Khalid. Upon hearing the news, Khalid immediately understood that Sophia was willing to cross any line to achieve her goals. He knew he had to act before anything more serious happened. By nightfall, Khalid summoned Layla to the main hall. She felt tense but accepted the invitation. As soon as she entered, Khalid approached her with determination in his eyes. "Layla, I want you to know that you are not alone in this fight," he said firmly. "I will make sure nothing happens to you or Yusuf." Layla looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. "I hope you're right, Khalid, because I've already lost everything once. I can't lose my son." Khalid nodded, "And I won't let that happen." That night marked the beginning of a new battle, where loyalties would be tested and secrets would finally come to light. The palace was cloaked in an unsettling calm. After ordering that Sophia be placed under surveillance, Khalid went to the reading room, a place where memories often haunted him. Layla, meanwhile, sat in her room, burdened by a tension she couldn't quite explain. Something inside her told her she was on the verge of uncovering truths that could change everything. Later that evening, Khalid sent a note asking Layla to meet him in the main hall. When she arrived, he stood by a large fireplace, his eyes fixed on the flames. "Layla, thank you for coming," he said, without looking away from the fire. "Why did you call me?" she asked, crossing her arms. Khalid turned slowly, his expression serious. "There are things you need to know. My past, my losses. They weigh more heavily on us than you realize." Layla frowned, confused. "If it's something that could affect us, I believe I have the right to know." He nodded and gestured for her to sit. "Years ago, I lost my wife in an accident. It was a moment that shattered everything I thought was secure. Since then, I've shut myself off from the world, refusing to let anyone get close. But then, you came along." Layla felt a chill but stayed silent, listening intently. "You are not just a dancer in my palace, Layla. You've brought something I thought I had lost forever. Hope," Khalid continued, his voice softer. "The way you fight for Yusuf, it reminds me of what truly matters in life. I see my own struggles in yours, but I also see a strength I have long since lost." "Why are you telling me all this now?" Layla asked, trying to process the weight of his words. Khalid stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Because to protect you and your son, I need you to trust me completely. And for that, you need to know the whole truth." Layla stayed silent as Khalid went on. He revealed that his wife's death had not been just an accident, but the result of intrigue within his own family. This explained why he kept Sophia under surveillance and why he was so determined to protect Layla. "My family never accepted my wife. She didn't come from a noble social circle, and to them, that was unacceptable," Khalid said, his voice heavy with bitterness. "We paid the price for defying them, and she lost her life." Layla felt a lump in her throat. She had never imagined that Khalid carried such deep pain. "And now you think Sophia will do the same to me?" "It's not a matter of thinking, Layla. I know," Khalid replied. "She has already shown she's willing to go to any lengths to get rid of you. That's why you must always be on guard. Trust no one but me." Khalid's words hung in the air, filled with intensity. Layla felt torn. On one hand, she wanted to believe he was being sincere. On the other, trusting him meant placing her fate in the hands of a man who still harbored many secrets. The next morning, Layla decided to seek answers on her own. After ensuring Yusuf was safe, she walked through the palace to the secluded wing where Khalid kept personal documents and belongings. She needed to learn more about the man who had promised to protect her family. Entering the room, Layla found a photo album on the table. It contained images of Khalid alongside a smiling woman and a young boy. The happiness on their faces contrasted sharply with the serious expression Khalid wore now. As she flipped through the album, a letter fell out. Layla picked it up and read the handwritten words. It was a farewell message from Khalid's wife, written shortly before her death. My dearest Khalid, I know our love will face storms, but never forget what we built together. Protect our family, even if it costs everything. With eternal love, Amal. Tears filled Layla's eyes as she read. At last, she understood the burden Khalid carried. He wasn't just protecting her. He was trying to atone for a failure he hadn't been able to prevent in the past. Later, Khalid found Layla sitting quietly in the garden. He approached her slowly, aware that something had changed. You read the letter, Khalid said bluntly. Layla simply nodded. Now I understand why you do what you do. But even so, it doesn't change the fact that we're caught in a dangerous game. Khalid sighed, sitting down beside her. I don't want you to go through what Amal went through. I don't want to lose anyone else. Then what do we do now? Layla asked, her eyes filled with determination. Khalid looked toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set. We fight, and we won't let anyone take away what's ours. That night, Layla felt more confident. For the first time, she saw Khalid not as a distant and enigmatic man, but as someone who carried the same pain and strength as she did. Despite the dangers, she felt that together they could overcome any obstacle. While Layla put Yusuf to bed, Khalid, in another part of the palace, began devising a plan. He knew Safiya still had tricks up her sleeve, but he was ready to do whatever it took to protect Layla and Yusuf. The pieces were in motion, and fate would soon test them all. Layla woke with a sense of unease. The palace, usually serene in the morning, seemed cloaked in a heavy tension. As she dressed, she heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. Opening the door, she found a maid with a pale face who warned her, Miss Safiya is planning something. Be careful. The tension in the air was palpable, but Layla forced herself to stay calm. She knew Safiya wouldn't give up easily, and the only thing she could do was be prepared for whatever might come. Later, Khalid summoned Layla to his office. He was seated behind a dark wooden desk surrounded by documents. His eyes, usually calm, now reflected a concern he tried to conceal. I've received information that Safiya is using her influence to discredit you, Khalid said plainly. She's handed over a dossier to the local authorities, accusing you of dishonoring traditions and tarnishing the palace's reputation. Layla felt the ground shift beneath her. This could put me in danger, and Yusuf too. I know, Khalid replied, his voice steady, but I've already taken measures. I need you to trust me. Trust isn't something I can give so easily. Layla countered, bitterness in her tone. Khalid leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. I know it's hard, but you're not alone in this. I will protect you, Layla, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Safiya walked down the corridor with a man whose appearance was unassuming but dangerous. She led him to a private room, where she placed a thick envelope in his hands. Do whatever is necessary, she ordered. I want Layla out of this palace by the end of the week. The man nodded and disappeared into the shadows. Safiya smiled, convinced her plan was about to succeed. That night, Layla felt restless. Something inside her urged her to act before it was too late. She decided to confront Safiya directly, knowing full well the risk involved. After ensuring Yusuf was safe, she walked down the corridor to Safiya's quarters. Upon entering, she found the woman seated in front of a mirror, adjusting her sparkling jewelry. I see you've come to confront me, Safiya said, not even turning around. Why are you doing this? Layla asked, her voice heavy with emotion. Safiya finally stood, turning to face her. Because you don't belong here. Khalid is my family, and you're just an intruder, pulling him away from his true responsibilities. I'm not here for Khalid, Layla replied, anger spilling into her words. I'm here for my son, trying to survive. This has nothing to do with you. Safiya stepped forward, her gaze cold. Everything that happens under this roof involves me, and I will not let you ruin our reputation with your presence. Before Layla could respond, the door to the room burst open. Khalid entered, his eyes blazing with fury. Safiya, enough, he roared, his voice echoing through the room. Safiya froze, clearly startled by her cousin's sudden arrival. Khalid advanced until he was face to face with her. If I find out you've taken any further action against Layla or Yusuf, you will be banished from this palace. And this time, there will be no second chances. Safiya pressed her lips together, but said nothing. Khalid then turned to Layla. Come. It's not safe for you here. Layla hesitated but followed him. As they walked through the corridors, Khalid explained, Sophia is out of control. I need to deal with her once and for all. And how do you plan to do that? Layla asked, her concern evident. Khalid stopped and turned to her. I'm going to convene the family council. They need to know just how far Sophia is willing to go. In the meantime, I want you to stay away from her. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the palace grew even more tense. Sophia appeared more reserved, but Layla knew it was merely the calm before the storm. Khalid was constantly preoccupied, preparing for the council meeting. One evening, Layla was summoned to the main hall for an urgent meeting with Khalid. When she arrived, she found him standing beside two men who appeared to be members of the family council. They were speaking in low voices, but fell silent when they saw her. Layla, I want you to meet Mr. Abbas and Mr. Rashid, Khalid said, introducing the men. They're members of the council and are here to evaluate the situation. Layla greeted them but felt a chill run down her spine. Abbas's scrutinizing gaze seemed to pierce right through her, while Rashid maintained a neutral expression. We're here to ensure that everything is resolved fairly, Abbas said in a stern voice. We trust that you'll cooperate. Layla simply nodded, aware that every word and gesture she made would be scrutinized. While Khalid and the council discussed the next steps, Sophia was plotting her final move. In a secluded room, she reviewed incriminating documents that could be used against Layla. Her plan was straightforward. Deliver the information directly to the authorities, ensuring Layla's expulsion from the country and, hopefully, separating her from Yusuf forever. But Khalid had anticipated this move. He sent one of his trusted men to intercept the documents before they could reach the wrong hands. When Sophia discovered this, she was furious, but there was nothing more she could do without fully exposing herself. The next morning, Khalid summoned everyone to the grand hall. The family council was present, as were Sophia and Layla. The tension in the room was almost tangible as Khalid stepped to the center, his posture rigid and commanding. It's time to resolve this once and for all, he said firmly. Sophia has acted against Layla and Yusuf, jeopardizing the safety and honor of this palace. Sophia tried to defend herself, but Khalid raised his hand, silencing her. There is no room for your excuses, he continued. You have violated the trust of our family and endangered lives. The council will decide your fate. Layla watched silently as the council members deliberated. Finally, Abbas stood and declared, We agree that Sophia must be removed from the palace. Her actions are unacceptable, and the family's safety must take precedence. Furious, Sophia stormed out of the hall without looking back. Khalid exhaled, relieved, and approached Layla. You're safe now, he said. But Layla knew that, even with Sophia gone, the challenges were far from over. Layla woke in the middle of the night to a strange noise coming from the hallway. Her heart raced as she got up and carefully opened the door to peek out. Two men in dark uniforms were approaching, followed by Sophia, who wore a cold smile. Before Layla could close the door, they spotted her. Layla Roshan? One of the men asked, his voice firm. You are being summoned to answer to the authorities. What am I being accused of? Layla asked, alarmed but maintaining her composure. Violating the morality laws of this country, the man replied without expression. You need to come with us. Before Layla could respond, Khalid appeared in the hallway. His fury was palpable, and his commanding presence made the men hesitate. What is the meaning of this? Khalid demanded, his voice like thunder. We've received a formal complaint, one of the officials explained. We're just following orders. Khalid stepped closer, his dominant stance intimidating the men. Who authorized this action? I want to see the documents. The officer handed Khalid a document, which he quickly scanned, his eyes narrowing with each line. He knew this was Sophia's doing, even though her name didn't appear anywhere on it. This is absurd, Khalid declared, tearing the paper in half. Layla is my guest, and no one will lay a hand on her while she's under my roof. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, but Sophia stepped forward. The law is above any hospitality, Khalid, she said with a malicious smile. You can't protect her forever. Enough, Sophia, Khalid roared, his voice echoing through the hallway. You've done enough to harm Layla. If you continue with this madness, you'll face the consequences. The officers, sensing Khalid's unwavering stance, decided to withdraw for now, though they made it clear that the investigation would continue. That night, Khalid gathered his trusted men. "Safia has gone too far," he said, pacing in his study. "She's willing to destroy Layla just to get to me." "What should we do?" one of the men asked. Khalid stopped and looked out the window. "We need to find something that will completely expose her. Something that will prove to the authorities that the accusations against Layla are false and that Safia is the real culprit." Meanwhile, Layla was in her room, trying to soothe Yusuf, who had woken up frightened by the commotion. "Mommy's here," she whispered, holding him close. "Nothing will happen to us." But deep down, Layla felt that danger was closer than ever. She knew Khalid was doing everything possible to protect them, but she also knew Safia wouldn't stop until she was destroyed. The next morning, Layla was summoned to the main hall. Khalid was waiting for her, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said, gesturing to a chair. Layla sat down, feeling the weight of what was to come. "What happened?" "The authorities are still investigating," Khalid explained. "But Safia is playing dirty. She submitted falsified documents and accusations that could complicate your situation further." "What if they believe her?" Layla asked, her voice trembling. "Yusuf, is he in danger?" Khalid closed his eyes for a moment before answering. "I promise nothing will happen to him, but we need to be strategic. We'll face this together." As Layla tried to stay calm, Khalid continued his investigation. He knew Safia had fabricated evidence, but he needed something concrete to prove it. With the help of his contacts, he intercepted a message Safia had sent to the man working for her. The message was clear. "Make sure Layla is formally charged. If necessary, plant evidence." With this in hand, Khalid knew he had the upper hand. He arranged a meeting with the authorities to expose Safia and protect Layla. Hours before the meeting, Layla was approached by officers again. This time, they arrived with a formal arrest warrant. Khalid tried to intervene, but the men were determined to take her. "Please, take care of Yusuf," Layla said to Khalid as she was escorted out of the palace. "Promise me he'll be safe." "I promise," Khalid replied, his face grim. Layla was taken to a local prison, a cold and desolate place. Her cell was small, with a metal bed and a tiny window that let in only a sliver of light. She sat on the thin mattress, struggling to hold back her tears. Outside, Khalid sprang into action. He gathered the documents incriminating Safia and presented them to the authorities. The case took an unexpected turn when Safia was summoned to testify. Furious, she tried to deny everything, but the evidence was undeniable. "You attempted to frame an innocent woman," Khalid said during the hearing, "and for that, you will be held accountable." The authorities decided to release Layla while they conducted a deeper investigation into Safia's actions. Khalid went personally to retrieve her from the prison. When Layla emerged from her cell, she saw Khalid waiting for her. He looked relieved, though concern still lingered in his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, gently taking her arm. "Yes," Layla replied, though her voice was weak. "And Yusuf?" "He's safe," Khalid assured her. "Let's go home." On the way back to the palace, Layla remained silent, trying to process everything that had happened. When they arrived, Yusuf ran into her arms, and Layla held him tightly, silently vowing to do whatever it took to protect him. Khalid watched the scene from a distance, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. But he knew the battle wasn't over yet. Safia would face justice, and he would do everything in his power to ensure Layla and Yusuf could live in peace. The next morning began quietly, but Layla still felt the weight of the past few days. Though she was back in the palace, Safia's looming threat hung over her. Yusuf played in the garden under the supervision of one of the maids, while Layla walked slowly through the corridors. She was summoned to the main hall, where Khalid was waiting for her. He sat in an armchair near the window, gazing out at the distant desert. When Layla entered, he stood, his posture tense. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm yet calm. Layla nodded and sat in a nearby chair. "About what?" Khalid took a deep breath before speaking. "Since you arrived at the palace, your presence has affected me in ways I didn't expect. I tried to keep everything professional, but I can no longer ignore what I feel." Layla stared at him, surprised, but said nothing. Khalid continued. "You're strong, Layla. Your determination to protect Yusuf, your courage in the face of everything you've endured. It made me see things I had buried long ago. I'm not the man I was before I lost them all. But with you, I feel like I can start again." His words left her breathless. Layla knew Khalid had a kind and protective side, but she had never imagined he could have feelings for her. "Khalid, Layla began, but her voice faltered. She tried to gather her thoughts, but the intensity of the moment made it difficult. "I know this might be overwhelming for you right now," Khalid said, breaking the silence. "But I needed to be honest. I don't expect an answer from you immediately, Layla. I just wanted you to know what's in my heart." Layla lowered her gaze, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. "Everything I've done has been for Yusuf," she said at last. "But somehow you've become part of that. I don't know what to think, Khalid. My life has been so chaotic, I'm not sure I can trust something that feels too good to be true." Khalid stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You don't have to decide anything now. Just know that I'm here. No matter what happens, Layla, you'll never be alone again." The conversation with Khalid left her deep in thought for the rest of the day. As she watched Yusuf play, Layla reflected on his words. She had always built walls around her heart, but Khalid seemed determined to break through them. Later, Khalid joined them in the garden. He knelt beside Yusuf, who was building a tower with wooden blocks. "That tower's getting pretty tall, little one," Khalid said with a smile. Yusuf looked up at him, laughing. "It's going to reach the clouds." Layla watched the interaction with a mix of surprise and warmth. Khalid, who once seemed distant and stern, was now relaxed, almost fatherly. It was clear he had a genuine affection for Yusuf. That evening, Khalid invited Layla to dinner on one of the palace terraces. The setting was illuminated by lanterns, and the soft sound of music filled the air. Layla hesitated, but accepted the invitation. As they ate, Khalid broke the silence. "I know everything you've been through here has been difficult, but I want you to know I'm working to ensure that Sophia will never have power over you or Yusuf again." "Thank you," Layla replied, keeping her eyes on her plate. "But it's hard to forget everything that's happened." Khalid nodded in understanding. "I don't expect you to forget, but I want you to trust that I'm on your side. I always will be." There was a moment of silence between them, broken only by the music playing softly in the background. Then Khalid stood and extended his hand to Layla. "Dance with me." Layla looked at him, surprised. "Now?" "Now," he said with a gentle smile. She hesitated but took his hand. Khalid guided her to the center of the terrace, where they began to dance under the starry sky. Their movements were slow and natural, and Layla realized that, for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. As they danced, Khalid whispered, "Layla, since you arrived, you've brought light to this place. I hope you can see that." She didn't respond, but the silence between them was filled with meaning. After the dance, Layla retired to her room, while Khalid remained on the terrace, lost in thought. He knew he had taken an important step by confessing his feelings, but he also understood that earning Layla's trust would take time. Elsewhere in the palace, Sophia, who had been informed of the growing closeness between the two, was already planning her next move. The anger in her eyes was unmistakable, and she was determined not to let Layla claim a place so close to Khalid. While Layla tried to rest, an unease kept her awake. She knew her journey was far from over, but somehow she felt that she had found someone in Khalid she could rely on. The night passed slowly, and as Layla watched Yusuf sleep, she thought about Khalid's words. Was it possible to build something new amid the chaos? The next day could bring more changes, but Layla was determined to face whatever came her way, alongside those willing to fight with her. The sun rose over the desert horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. Layla woke with a strange feeling, a mixture of relief and concern. Khalid's words still echoed in her mind, and his gesture in asking her to dance the previous night remained etched in her heart. While slipping into a light tunic, Layla glanced at Yusuf, who was still peacefully asleep. He was the center of her world, the reason she was willing to face any challenge. Khalid had promised to protect them, but Layla knew that trusting someone was never easy. As she came down for breakfast, she found Khalid at the table, a cup of coffee in his hands and a thoughtful expression on his face. He greeted her with a slight smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice low but warm. "Good morning," Layla replied, taking a seat across from him. There was a brief silence before Khalid broke it. "Layla, there's something I need to discuss with you." She frowned slightly, sensing a bit of tension in the air. "What is it?" Khalid set his cup down, his eyes meeting hers. "Sophia hasn't been completely neutralized. She still has allies outside the palace, people willing to help her cause trouble." Layla felt her stomach turn, but kept her composure. "What does that mean for us?" "It means we need to be cautious," Khalid explained. "I want you and Yusuf to stay within the palace as much as possible. I'm increasing security, but I can't underestimate Safia's intentions." Layla nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect my son." "And I'll do whatever it takes to protect both of you," Khalid added, his voice unwavering. That afternoon, Layla decided to take Yusuf to the garden, where he could play safely under the watchful eyes of the guards. She watched him run between the flowers, laughing and enjoying himself as any child should. The scene brought a brief moment of peace to Layla's heart. However, the peace was interrupted when one of the guards approached hastily. "Miss Layla, Mr. Khalid requests your presence in the main hall immediately." Layla's heart raced, but she remained composed. Instructing the maid to look after Yusuf, she followed the guard to the hall. When she arrived, she found Khalid speaking with a stern-looking man dressed in formal attire. Noticing her entrance, Khalid turned and motioned for her to come closer. "Layla, this is Mr. Farid," he said. "He's an investigator hired to help us resolve the matter with Safia." Layla greeted Farid with a nod. "What have you discovered so far?" Farid opened a folder and revealed some documents. "Safia is in contact with influential figures outside the palace, including a member of the local police. She's planning to use these connections to fabricate more false evidence against you." A chill ran down Layla's spine. "That means I'm still in danger." "Don't worry," Khalid intervened. "We're monitoring her every move, but it's important for you to know what we're up against." Layla thanked Khalid and Farid, though her unease remained. She knew Safia was cunning and dangerous. Later, Layla returned to Yusuf's room and found him drawing on a sheet of paper. He smiled as she entered. "Look, Mama, it's you and me in the garden." Layla knelt down to see the drawing, her heart swelling with love. "It's beautiful, my dear." She hugged him tightly, silently promising herself that she would do whatever it took to keep him safe. That night, Khalid convened a meeting with his most trusted allies in the palace's private hall. He explained the situation in detail, emphasizing the urgency of exposing Safia and ensuring Layla and Yusuf's safety. "She's already caused too much damage," Khalid said firmly. "We need to uncover her lies before she gains more allies." One of the men suggested intercepting Safia's messages to learn more about her plans. Khalid agreed and tasked Farid with leading the operation. Meanwhile, in a secluded part of the city, Safia met with a man of ominous appearance. "We have little time," she said, handing him an envelope. "Make sure these documents get into the right hands." The man nodded and disappeared into the night. Safia smiled, confident that her victory was near. In the days that followed, the tension in the palace grew. Khalid and Farid worked tirelessly to gather evidence against Safia, while Layla did her best to keep Yusuf distracted and away from the turmoil. Finally, one afternoon, Farid brought good news. "We intercepted a crucial message," he told Khalid. "We now have enough evidence to expose Safia." Khalid immediately called for a family council meeting. Layla was invited to attend, knowing that her life and Yusuf's were at stake. In the main hall, the council members were gathered, their expressions solemn. Khalid presented the evidence Farid had collected, including messages that revealed Safia's malicious intentions. "Safia has endangered not only Layla and Yusuf but also the reputation of this palace," Khalid declared. "Her actions are unforgivable." The council reviewed the evidence, and it didn't take long for them to reach a decision. Safia was to be officially banished from the palace and handed over to the authorities to answer for her crimes. Layla felt immense relief as she heard the verdict. At last, the threat was being eliminated. Safia was escorted out of the palace under the watchful eyes of the guards. Her expression was a mix of fury and humiliation, but she offered no resistance. As the doors closed behind her, Layla felt as though a tremendous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Khalid approached her, his eyes reflecting both relief and determination. "Now you and Yusuf can finally have peace," he said with a gentle smile. Layla nodded, moved. "Thank you, Khalid, for everything." "I only did what was right," he replied, "and I'll do whatever it takes to ensure you both remain safe from now on." That night, Layla sat on the balcony of her room, gazing at the stars. For the first time in a long while, she felt a genuine sense of calm. Yusuf slept peacefully, and Khalid had kept his promise to protect them. Yet Layla knew that the future might still hold challenges. The following days brought a tranquility Layla hadn't felt in ages. Sophia had been banished from the palace, and Khalid had fulfilled his promise of ensuring her and Yusuf's safety. Still, Layla couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was on the horizon. One morning, while having coffee on the terrace, Khalid approached, looking more relaxed than usual. He held a small envelope in his hands, his eyes carrying a peculiar glimmer. "Layla," he began, handing her the envelope, "I want you to read this." Layla opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter. The words, though simple, carried an emotional weight. It was a formal message from Khalid, offering her the freedom to leave the palace with Yusuf if she wished. "Why are you giving me this?" she asked, confused. "I want you to know that you've never been a prisoner here," Khalid explained. "You are free to choose what's best for you and your son. But I also want you to know that if you decide to stay, this palace will always be your home." Layla looked at Khalid, feeling a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "What if I don't know what the best choice is?" Khalid stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers. "Then I ask you to trust me, not just as someone who promised to protect you, but as someone who deeply cares about you." As Layla pondered Khalid's words, Yusuf played in the garden, laughing and running with a small wooden airplane Khalid had commissioned for him. The scene was simple but filled with meaning. Layla knew Yusuf was safe here, something she had never been able to ensure elsewhere. Yet the thought of depending on Khalid still unsettled her. She had always fought alone, and allowing someone to become such an integral part of her life was new and daunting. That evening, Khalid arranged a special dinner on the terrace. The table was adorned with flowers and candles, and a gentle breeze made the atmosphere even more inviting. Layla hesitated to accept the invitation but eventually decided to go. "Why all this?" she asked as she sat down. "I want to celebrate the fact that we're finally free from threats," Khalid replied with a sincere smile. "And more importantly, I want to celebrate you and Yusuf." Layla couldn't help but smile. As cautious as she was, she couldn't deny that Khalid made everything feel lighter. As the evening progressed, they talked about everything. Their lives before meeting each other, the challenges they had faced, and the dreams they still held. For the first time, Layla felt she could truly trust Khalid. "I know it's early to think about the future," Khalid said, breaking a moment of silence. "But I want you to know that, no matter what you choose, I'll stand by your side." Layla took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "Thank you, Khalid, for everything." In the days that followed, Layla began exploring new possibilities. She didn't want to simply be protected. She wanted to build something for herself and for Yusuf. Khalid, recognizing her determination, encouraged her to pursue whatever would bring her happiness. One morning, he led her to a small hall within the palace that had been unused for years. "I thought you might turn this into something of your own," he suggested. "Maybe a school for Yusuf and other children, or a space to teach dance." Layla remained silent, deeply moved by the gesture. She knew Khalid was showing her that she could play an important role here, not just as a guest, but as someone who could contribute meaningfully to this place. "It's beautiful," she finally said. "I'd love to do something like this." As Layla began planning what she would do with the hall, Khalid watched her from a distance, a growing sense of satisfaction filling him. He had always known Layla was strong and determined, but seeing her thrive under his protection warmed his heart. Yet Khalid also knew that challenges still lay ahead. His position in the palace and his connection to Layla could spark new conflicts, and he would need to be ready to face them. One afternoon, as Layla worked in the hall, Yusuf came running in, holding a piece of paper. "Mama, look what I drew." Layla took the paper and saw a simple but meaningful drawing. It was of her, Yusuf, and Khalid, all holding hands, with a bright sun shining above them. "It's beautiful, my love," she said, hugging her son. Khalid, who had just entered the room, smiled as he saw the drawing. "Looks like we're already a family," he remarked playfully. Layla looked at him, and for the first time she felt that it could truly be possible. The following week, Layla woke with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The security Khalid provided and Yusuf's laughter filled her heart with hope. That morning, as she strolled through the garden, Khalid approached her with a look that blended seriousness and warmth. "Layla, may I steal you away for a few hours today?" he asked, extending his hand. "Where are we going?" she asked, surprised. "It's a secret," he replied with an enigmatic smile. Khalid took her to the desert, where a hidden oasis seemed to appear out of nowhere. The place was magical, with palm trees swaying gently in the breeze and a lake reflecting the sky. At the center was a table elegantly decorated with white flowers and candles. "Khalid, what is this?" Layla asked, amazed. "I want this moment to be unforgettable," he replied, pulling out a chair for her to sit. During dinner, Khalid spoke about how Layla and Yusuf had transformed his life. "Before you, this palace was just an empty structure," he said. "But now it's a home, and I want to make it official." Layla looked at him, puzzled, until Khalid stood and took a small box from his pocket. He knelt down, his eyes fixed on hers. "Layla, from the moment you entered my life, everything changed. You've brought light to my darkest days and shown me the true meaning of love and courage. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side. Will you marry me?" Layla was speechless, tears streaming down her face. With a voice choked with emotion, she replied, "Yes, Khalid, I will." Khalid smiled as he slipped the ring onto her finger, a delicate gold band with a small diamond that sparkled in the sunlight. He stood and pulled her into a tight embrace, followed by a gentle, emotion-filled kiss. The following months were dedicated to wedding preparations. Yusuf, excited, took part in every detail. The palace was transformed into a fairy tale setting, with gardens adorned with flower arches and lights that twinkled like stars. On the big day, Layla wore a white gown with intricate gold accents. Her light veil floated in the breeze as she walked down the aisle, accompanied by Yusuf, who proudly held her hands. Khalid waited for her at the altar, dressed in a pristine ceremonial tunic. His smile was calm, but his eyes conveyed the deep emotion of the moment. When their eyes met, Layla felt as though the weight of her past had vanished. The officiant recited words of unity, and Khalid slipped a new ring onto Layla's finger. When she did the same for him, a profound sense of wholeness filled them both. After the ceremony, the reception was held in the palace gardens. Guests danced, laughed, and celebrated the couple's union. Layla and Khalid danced beneath the stars, while Yusuf ran between the tables, handing out small bouquets of flowers. "Khalid," Layla whispered as they danced, "thank you for everything, for giving me a home and a new life." "It's I who should thank you," Khalid replied, his voice filled with emotion. "You've brought joy and meaning into my life." Months turned into years, and life at the palace flourished. Layla transformed one wing of the palace into a school for local children, while Khalid dedicated himself to expanding his humanitarian projects. Yusuf grew up happy, surrounded by love and security. He loved helping Layla at the school and often accompanied Khalid on some of his trips, learning about responsibility and leadership. Every day, Layla felt that her decision to trust Khalid and accept his love had been the right one. The past, though marked by hardships, had laid the foundation for a future filled with love, hope, and happiness. What did you think of Layla and Khalid's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories, and don't miss more heartwarming tales by clicking here on the end screen.